Glad to be here for another Sunday afternoon class from the Brigham Young University Family History Library. I'd like to remind everyone that these classes are recorded and put up on our BYU Family History Library YouTube channel, as well as on the BYU Family History Library website. And we'd like to also mention that we have on the BYU Family History Library website, we have a link to our virtual help line. You can go to the BYU Family History Library website, and if you just type in BYU Family History Library, you'll find the website immediately. And then click in the upper right-hand corner, and then you'll be asked to connect, and you'll connect through a Zoom directly to the desk during the hours that the library is open, which are posted right there below the link. And then someone can help you or direct you to someone who can. And then if they need me, they can always call me, and I can get on and we can talk through the Zoom at the library, which works really well, by the way. Okay, well, we're going to talk today about BYU FamilySearch. BYU, sorry, it's not BYU. Didn't catch that one, did I? Anyway, FamilySearch partner websites. And it's called Discovering Findmypast. Now, Findmypast is a very large website, but a word before we get to that. And the reason why these are partnership websites, because FamilySearch has negotiated agreements with various of these individual companies, they have done exchanges of information. For example, FamilySearch has a lot of records, and they're trying to use volunteers to do the indexing. The other companies hire people to do indexing. So in exchange for indexing some of the records from FamilySearch and paying to have them indexed, then FamilySearch will then share the records with that company. So some of these companies, all these partners companies, have benefited to some extent with a sharing arrangement or some other beneficial part of the arrangement between FamilySearch and the company. And the trade-off has been that members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints have free access to all of these different subscription websites. Now, the subscriptions vary. For instance, I would say the most complete subscription is MyHeritage. And MyHeritage, if you take advantage of MyHeritage, you basically get everything you want to, everything the program has. If you're going with Ancestry or Findmypast, you get their complete data set on their website, but they have other data programs that are not included. For Findmypast, it's the British Newspapers Project, which they charge an extra amount for. Ancestry has newspapers.com, which they charge for, and Fold3, and some other programs. So as you go through these, some of them will have complete access and others will not have complete access. But in this case, with Findmypast, the complete access is certainly a tremendous value and should be taken advantage of. And so these partnerships benefit both FamilySearch and the partners. And the questions that I have frequently are, well, what happens if they end the partnership and walk away? Well, it's not quite that simple, because once they became part of FamilySearch's partnership and they incorporated a substantial number of records in their website from FamilySearch, they're in a sense locked in with FamilySearch. They could go out of business, I suppose. It's not likely. They're very large companies. But if they did, there would be some other somebody else would take over that particular huge amount of information and run it, and would find themselves in this position of having to maintain that partnership. So as these companies, by the way, have been sold back and forth and had new investors and things, the partnerships have not changed. So there's not a chance of that happening. Maybe a very faint chance. Okay, so I'm going to focus just on Findmypast, findmypast.com. And in order to get started, I like to have this analogy. There are not very high percentage of members of the church who are actively involved in genealogy at the research level. There's a lot of people involved at the participation level and attending temple and doing the things like that. But as far as the actual researchers are concerned, there's a very small percentage. And of those people who are actively involved in research, there are still a very small percentage of them that take advantage of all of the partner programs. Now, you may think, well, don't they all have the same records? And the answer to that is no, they do not all have the same records. And they are uniquely able in each case to solve certain kinds of problems that you may in fact have. And you may not know that the solution to your problem is just a few clicks away and registering with either Ancestry, Findmypast, or any of the other programs. And so what happens here is that it's sort of like, I've got my analogy here. It's like driving with a flat tire. You can still keep moving, but you're not really taking advantage of the efficiency and the speed and the amount of information that is readily available through these other programs. The questions also arise is, do you have to have your family tree on all the programs? The answer is yes, because that is the way you get the maximum information. Each of these programs have some form of record matching or record hints, which tells you that their computer has searched their database and come up with records that can assist you in your research. And so having your family tree on all these. Now, people say, well, how do I do about maintaining the family tree? Well, I don't know that you would want to maintain it on all the programs. You might want to choose one of the programs for a backup program with FamilySearch, but the other programs can simply have what is, when you're doing your research, then you fill in the blanks on that program to get the record hints of the area that you're doing research in after you have a family tree established. Now, if you're not a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, you get all the same benefits, unfortunately, but you have to pay the subscription price for these subscription websites. In the past, before there was a partnership, I obviously had to pay up for all of these, and I did, because they were worth the money that it cost me to maintain the membership because of the vast amount of information I was receiving. And there's a trade-off here, and you have to think of it in terms of what their benefit might be. Just a little background, Findmypast is owned by publishing giant DC Thomson. And it's a Scottish company, and their words, a global player in the family history market. Well, they are, and they are a very significant website as far as the amount of information. In this one screenshot here, you'll see a note that says Findmypast partners with the Francis Firth collection and releases 300,000 new historical photographs. The numbers of records that are incorporated in these websites is just utterly phenomenal. And and as we talk here about Findmypast, I will help you to understand what kinds of records. So if you remember that there was a British Empire at one time, And perhaps you've never really looked at a map of the British Empire showing all the empire, portions of the empire. But if you think about that, these are the records that go into making Find My Past such a tremendous resource. Now, in addition to that, let me just highlight a few things. For example, we do have one of the missionaries at the BYU Family History Library who has ancestry in India. Her ancestors were British citizens who were in India. And those records, this is the records. This Find My Past is what we have. And it is phenomenal. There are something like 80 million records in there of all of the British activities in India. And Australia, for example, we all have, a lot of us end up having relatives in Australia. The reason being that it was another place where people emigrated. I have 3 of my family lines that came from Australia, and Find My Past has been extraordinarily helpful in finding those people in Australia. So there's just, and South Africa and all these other countries that are outlined here, Canada. And so this is a place to go for records from all of these countries in red. And remember that at one point in time, the United States did not exist, and the eastern seaboard of the United States was part of the British Empire, and it was also of the colonies. So when we go back before 1776, we're going to go into a lot of times into English records. So even though your ancestors may have lived in Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Pennsylvania, et cetera, a lot of them originated in the British Isles, and their records would be on Find My Past. Now, before I go too much further, mention that as far as core records for Find My Past, they include England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, and Ireland. And a lot of people are wondering, well, I don't know where to find my Irish ancestors. Well, Find My Past is a good place to start. They may or may not have the records. Ireland has a very interesting past, and I've talked about that in other classes. But the point here is that as part of the British Empire and part of Britain, Great Britain, until 1924, Ireland was part of Britain, and so clear back into the 1600s. And so the record sets are they overlap. In other words, you have Irish records that are in Irish and just their records, like their church records, for example, and those in the Catholic Church records, those were not necessarily integrated with Great Britain, but all the rest of the records, civil registration and all of those, and the census records and things like that. Unfortunately, Irish census records were not available. They were destroyed except for certain parts of the Irish records, but there are still a significant number of Irish records on the Find My Past website. Okay, and just for numbers' sake, Find My Past has over 3.5 billion records. I've never understood how that, it sounds, I think they put those numbers out to impress people because a big number is something that's hard to comprehend. Let's just say there's a lot of records, and it's a vast resource, and I find it extremely useful, and I'll hopefully be able to help you understand it is. So if you're thinking about getting started from ground zero, let's say you have no real understanding or information, you know who your parents are, you might know who most of your grandparents are, and you may have heard of some of your great grandparents, and that's about it. Then I suggest that starting from scratch is a very good idea. You really need to start with yourself, and your parents and your grandparents, and work yourself back through time. It's very seductive, I think, to look at a fan chart, for example, and see, oh, wow, there's this blank space back there and it's in like 1680. Maybe I could find that person and jump back and start trying to do research with that person. Not, not a good idea. First of all, you really have to come to a individual conclusion that all of the parent-child relationships between you and all of the people on that fan chart are accurate and correct. And otherwise, anything past the lack of a parent-child relationship source that demonstrates on paper a parent-child relationship, you're probably getting off into, Never Never Land, imaginary world, whatever. And that's not going to help you if you jump back and find out later that, oh, by the way, you were never related to that person. So I would suggest starting. And for those of us who have verified at long distance, lots of our lines, and we think that's, well, we're mostly have exhausted everything we can think of. Well, if you haven't been using Findmypast, then you might find that a lot of the questions you thought were more difficult and insolvable, perhaps, may be resolved, because here's another completely different set of records in some cases than what you're able to get. So you can start your family tree on Findmypast with a GEDCOM file, and that's one way to get started. And if you don't know what a GEDCOM file is, then a GEDCOM file is a genealogical data communications program. It means if you have your data in some other program like RootsMagic or Ancestral Quest, you can download a GEDCOM file from those programs and upload that information you may already have in those other programs into Findmypast. The information that you put up there is only as good as the information that you have. It doesn't make it any better to put it into a family tree on Findmypast. You still have to do all of the work of verifying the connections between all of your ancestors. Okay, this is what a family tree looks like on Findmypast. It may be a little bit different than you're used to looking at. Most of the time, if you are thinking in terms of a standard pedigree chart off to the left, for example, there are some different views, but this is the standard view. And obviously they're parents, and then they have a line down, and there's the children, and then they have possibility of lines down, and there's parents with whatever. And these are the siblings. So, and the spouses, and then you can go back on the spouses line because there's more information because we're on the Newton line. So you click on this button and it goes back to the, click on the button on Charles Parkinson and it would go back on the Parkinson line. So these are, this is a pretty simplified family tree compared to FamilySearch, but it's sophisticated enough for good research because there's a lot more to it, and I will show you that in a moment. So basically, to get started, you add in the people you know, and in this case, when you click to add a person, you can add in a father, mother, spouse, sibling, or child, and then you'll have forms to add those people into your family tree, and you can continue to build your family tree. You also can click on your account and see your personal information, whether or not you have the right subscription. You may be working on a free subscription rather than the partnership one, or sometimes people already have an existing subscription. When you have an existing subscription to a partner program, say, for instance, you subscribe to Findmypast, and then you discover that, oh, there's a free one, I would let your paid one run out and then go ahead and get on the free one. If you take the free one, it will probably simply substitute it for your page subscription. And maybe 6 of one, half a dozen of another, but there's different ways. So you feel like you at least got your money's worth out before you switched over. They do have a DNA associated program. It's not actually part of the program itself, but it's associated program. Okay. So now, if you get onto the program and you have uploaded some or all of your genealogical data that you want to include, you can then begin to explore the options here. You can set the first person in your family tree. You can look at a family view, which is more like a descendancy view, and then Hepzibah, and then you have an individual one that link to the profile page for the person who is highlighted. And it's if you're used to working with FamilySearch or any other program, you'll find that this is fairly simple compared to some of the more complicated programs. So if I click on a person's icon, like Compass Parkinson down here, I will see that person's details. So now I can see he was born in 1830, and he married about 1854, and he was married on a boat from Australia to the United States. So this is some information about the individuals in the file. And as you can see, there's the connection to England, but there's also this connection to Australia. So having both records on the website starts to be an advantage in this particular case. So now we're going to explore the profile page. So there's lots of different things. First of all, you click on the profile link, and then you have quite a bit more information about the family and about the individuals. I guess there's two ways of looking at family tree programs. One is to try to put all the information that you can possibly cram into the family tree where you look at it. And the other one is to put it as little information as is absolutely necessary to identify the people, and then click out to everything else. Well, they've chosen obviously the second choice, which is to have a more simplified family tree, but then include a tremendous amount of information in the profiles. So you can go into facts and events and relations of various genealogical relationships, add media, add notes, and in this case, there are 4 new record hints available for this person. The next thing that you'll want to do, and perhaps if you elect to have a family tree, then they will start giving you record hints, which will be helpful. And with the case with all record hints, you are still under the obligation of reviewing and determining whether the information provided actually applies to your particular person. You don't really need to, you cannot inevitably rely on the computer because they are not infallible. And so you, in each case where you have a record match or a record hint, you need to make sure that it makes sense and that it is actually the person involved. And if you can't tell, then you may not want to attach it. And if it is obviously not, then you can simply dismiss it. So if you're searching all the records, this is a way to get into the records that are on the website. And I might suggest that doing record searches on Findmypast is it's much easier to not get so many false positives as you might get with some other programs. If I were ranking the search engines on the various programs, it would be a hard choice, but I would rank Findmypast for some of the features that it has above some of the other large online websites.
Elder Tanner.
It's not as, none of them are perfect, and a lot of them will still turn in a lot of what I call false positives or returns that aren't your person. But in the case of Findmypast, it is really good. It is a very accurate assessment, especially if you have enough information and you enter that information. So by clicking that, you can search all the records. And I go directly to this when I do the searches. There's always a little search from the startup screen or something, but I always like to have all my options available before I start the search. And you get a form that looks just about like this when you search all the records. And you'll see that you can enter a name, date. The inclination that people have is to fill out everything. And my inclination is to go just exactly 180 degrees opposite, and that is put in only the minimal amount of information that I can possibly imagine and see where that leads me. And in the case of Findmypast, there is a extremely interesting and helpful way to do the research. And it may seem a little bit cumbersome, but in the long run, you'll find your that the results of your searches are exceptionally more accurate. This is one way to quickly determine whether you have what kind of a playing field you have for how many records how many people with the same name or whatever that you're really going to have to deal with, and find out if what you already have is exactly what you need as far as looking. And so I'm going to go through this process, kind of explain each step and what the results are, so that you can see what happens as you do a search. Now, let's say, for example, let's give a hypothetical. Let's say, for example, I wanted to find someone whose name was.
I said to try and turn up your volume. They're having trouble hearing you.
It's all the way up.
Okay.
Can you hear me better now, or? I know I don't know. I'm just going to have to get out of the whole thing because I don't know what's up. Okay, let me just check real quick here on the.
James, you went much louder just then.
Yeah, I think that for some reason my AirPods got messed up somehow, and I never got over it until just now. Sorry about the sound. Somebody should have spoken up and stopped me. Okay, so now you can hear me fine.
Thanks.
Okay, so we'll go ahead with this. Okay, so the first thing I think is helpful is to choose the country. And you have Australia, New Zealand, Ireland, UK. You can connect the whole United Kingdom, England, Scotland, Wales. Now, obviously, if you're at the point where you don't know which of these to select, you're going to select it all and just do general searches, which really aren't going to help you, because the whole idea of doing research is to know and identify the location where events occurred in your ancestors' lives. So you're going to have to know that information in order for at least sketchy type of information like England, for example, to even start to do some research. So once you've selected the country, let's see, okay, here we go. Once you've selected the country, then the next step is to, on step 2, is to put in a name. And so in this case, I selected name of one of my ancestral line names, surnames from my ancestral lines. And this is the De Vries family, which happens to be a name that of some people from the Netherlands who emigrated to England at a very early date. And so the question is, how does this turn out? So once I've added a surname, I start to see results down here. And it says right now that there are 1,423 results for DeFries, and that's without a first name or a date of birth. So what this is telling me is out of the millions and millions of records, the 3.5 billion records on Findmypast, there are only 1,400 records that have that name. Now, how does that stack up? Well, if you do this search on surnames, eventually you'll get a feel for what the numbers mean. A number, if you had a surname that was common, for example, Brown or Jones or almost any name that you'd hear commonly from England, these names will come up with millions of results into the 3, 4, 5, 6 million records with that name. And so that tells you that the frequency of the surname gives you a rough estimate of how difficult it's going to be to identify people with the same or similar name. The more people you have with the surname, the greater the difference is. So how many Robert Andersons are there in England? Probably a couple of million. How many people with the name of DeFries? Right here it says there's only records for 1,423 results. And so DeFries is on the very, very, very low end of records that of surnames, that the frequency of surnames. I have found surnames on Findmypast where there were only 100 people in all of the records on all of Findmypast, only 100 records. And basically my conclusion to the person with that surname is you are related to every single one of those people. So just go find them, because inevitably you're going to find a way to connect all those people. There is just no way. Understanding how surnames are originated and where they came from. Tanner, for example, is an occupational surname, and it arose in various different parts of England. And so there are people who name Tanner who are not related at all. But here we have only 1,400 results with a name like DeFries. It's very likely that at least some of these people are interrelated. And it's possible they are, or possibly not. Now, it could be that this is a very common name in another country and just not common in England. So you have to kind of look at that. But this gives me a ballpark to work with. Now I know that we are going to have just this results, and I can start working with it and adding information in. So now I'm going to add in the next step is add a little bit more information. In this case, I've added the name of the person, and his name is Joseph George DeFries. And I added a birth year of 1821. And that was all I needed to add. And I'm down to 10 results. One of those, some of those, or one of those, or all of those 10 results are going to be my Joseph George DeFries. So let's see what happens when I switch over and go to using those things, and I see the results. Now I'm going to go over and see what the results are. So now we have Joseph George, born in 1821, and in 1871, he is under England, Wales crime, prisons, and punishment records. And of course I go, maybe I don't want to be related to this guy. No, I'm going to be related no matter what happens. So I go ahead and I say, let's see if that's my guy. And then I see him in the 1851 census, and he's in Bethnal Green. And these are all in London and Whitechapel and Stepney and Stourtage. Okay, so now what's the first problem that we have here? When we look at these records, and unless you are unless you grew up in London and were very, very familiar, like you were a taxi driver in London and you knew where all these places were, I really doubt that the average person coming into English research off the top of their head knows where Stepney is from Whitechapel, or whether Bethnal Green in London are, but how is Bethnal Green in London? And if these are all part of London, where are they? Well, so what do? Well, you put all of these places, look them up on Google Maps. So you just put in all of these different places. So start with London and drive to Bethnal Green, and then start and drive to West Ham, and then go to Whitechapel, and then go to Stepney, and then go to Shoreditch. Basically, you'll see how they're all, where they all are on the map. And if you do directions too. And once you've done those directions too, you can realize actually that these places are all no more than a few blocks away. So every one of these is possibly a candidate for being one of my being my relative, of being Joseph George. And I only have 10 people to work through. Now, by going through this process, I have cut it down from 3.5 billion records down to just 10 records that I'm looking at, and having pretty good inclination that all of these records, or some of these records, are my person. And yes, by the way, they are. And yes, he was in England's prisons system. He turned out to be a forger, passing off counterfeit different types of counterfeit documents. So he got in trouble in Netherlands, and left at Netherlands, came to England, and got in trouble again. But he had a lot of really illustrative and very upright descendants, and nobody seemed to follow this particular problem that he had. But this shows you the process. If you do this process and you come up with 1.5 million, then you simply don't have enough information. If you start specifying the information over on the left-hand side and give more information, even if it's a guess, then you may very well narrow it down to a point where you have a reasonable search, and the first listing of people will probably be very, very closely related to either your person or good candidates for your person. Okay, so that's step 4, when you view all the results. And if you see the red check marks, they're not really very visible, but if you see the red check marks over on the right, you'll see that they are. There are a couple of those records which I have attached and used myself. So, okay, and then if you click on a record, any one of those records, like the census record, then you have the transcription of that record. In some cases, you can view the image to the record, which means you may be able to download and attach the image to your person. But remembering that when you're doing research here in England and the other British countries, that not all those countries are allowing any kind of free access to their records. In England, they have a system called the Royal Copyright, and they have other claims to their government records that will basically which gives them the right to charge a fee for them. Right now, the last time we looked, it was like £8 to get a copy of one of the certificates. Now, if you're a dyed-in-the-wool researcher, you'll just simply pay the money and get the copy. But there is, from an informational standpoint, they have extracted the information. There may be additional information that'd be helpful on the certificate, but then you need to go through a different process to actually find this record. But now that you have some specific information about the person, you're probably not going to waste your money by buying the certificate. I might just mention that my daughter is consistently doing British research, and it's just simply a cost of doing the business of doing that. And she just gets certificates that she needs as quickly as she can from, and you can get them downloaded, and for a slightly, at one point, whether they're doing it now, you could get it downloaded. There have been times also when the records were available for free. During the pandemic, there was, and I may be still going on, but the General Register Office, which is the British entity that controls all the records, was allowing free access to probate records. And so my daughter was in spending day after day downloading every probate record she could find. So this is sufficient information to proceed ahead. Now, this may help you because you may find additional records on another website like FamilySearch or Ancestry. And I would use, by doing, especially doing English research, I would have all three programs available at all times. If I couldn't find it, if I wanted to find more information than I could find from FamilySearch, I would go to Ancestry. And if I didn't find an overwhelming amount of information out of Ancestry, I'd be going to Findmypast. And if I couldn't find records in either Ancestry or FamilySearch, I would be looking in Findmypast first. So this is kind of the, there's a way of doing this so that you use all the records. So here's my guy now, Joseph George DeFries. And he was born in 1822. And so we have that information. And now I can click and add him to my tree. So what if we want to see what kinds of records are available here on Findmypast? Well, there's a link right here, the A to Z of record sets. And I point out that each of the large websites, FamilySearch, Ancestry, in fact, all of them, all of the biggest websites, MyHeritage and Findmypast and the others, I'll let you look at all their record sets. In other words, if you want to just search and see what kinds of records they have, then that's a way to do that. So here on Findmypast, it's interesting to look at this and filter it out a little bit so that you can tell whether or not the website even has any records that you're looking for. So it's a good way to start getting an idea of what kinds of records you might find. So here you can then search and show put in a type of record and search by that type of record. And then you will be able to find all the record categories, and you'll be able to find all the records and different record sets that are on the website. This also allows you to search a specific record set, do a specific search on that record set with the little magnifying glass will get you into looking at that particular, examining that particular set of records. And it may well be that if you find, for instance, a parish register of your family from England, that you may want to use just that record, and you may not want to keep doing searches over and over. You may want to just get into the record and start going through and extracting all of your family names and all of the information from the parish register. And by serving a specific collection, then you'll have the you can narrow that down so you know exactly which area you're looking at, if you're correct. Okay, you can also get a list of what you've already attached or which records you've looked at and examined. So you can run down through. This is sort of like your research log showing you every record that you've looked at, and you can rate them and tag them. So if you want to do that, if you have special records, you can do that. And you can also go through and change the record and get a record summary of each of the records that you want. And over here on the right-hand side, you can see a little notebook and a camera and a page. So you can look at the page, you can edit that, and you can also download a picture, an image of the document when those images are available. You'll see some of the records as you go down the column do not have the camera, which means that they are either indexes or they are records that are only available through the General Register Office and not through Findmypast. Okay, so now we're going to look at record hints. So these little orange, sort of orangey colored dots with the numbers are the record hints, and they tell you how many record hints and where they're and by clicking on that, you'll be able to see what they suggest would be a record for that particular person. Well, before I get here, just one more note about record hints. The problem, some problems that is, I'd say it's a very good problem. It's something that's really nice to have, and that is be overwhelmed with the number of record hints that you have coming from these programs. If you have all 4 programs, Findmypast, MyHeritage, Ancestry, and FamilySearch, and you have a lot of people that you're connected to, you may end up with hundreds, even thousands, or even tens of thousands of record hints, which of course you're never going to work through. So what you need to do in that case is focus on the lines that you're interested in researching, and you'll find that the record hints run out fairly soon after you've decided that you're going to work with one particular line. And that would be the case in all of the records. But it's called, basically you're using all of these websites to find records for you. And hopefully you can use those records to do the research that you want to do and not what you're directed to do by just simply clicking on record hints and things like that. So you need to make up your mind what you really want to research. I mentioned they have a DNA association. It's not really part, it's maybe one of their partner programs, but it's a separate organization called Living DNA. The advantage of this company is that it focuses primarily on people living in England, in the British Isles. And so if your records are primarily from there, it may be to your advantage to add this DNA test for information. And you can also upload your other company's test results to Findmypast, so that if you have a DNA test from Ancestry, you can download the raw data from Ancestry and upload it into Findmypast. And then they can start getting matches and telling you that you have relatives in England. There's a lot of other things on the website that are, some are interesting and I guess educational. And it's just an interesting place to look for information and learn a little bit about what's going. There's a FamilySearch community, and you can click there and see what the members of the community have contributed to Findmypast. Okay, well, that gives you a fast run through Findmypast. I guess my conclusion to that would be, if you are not on Findmypast and trying to do research in the British Isles, then I would strongly suggest you get involved with the program, at least to the extent of doing searches and using the record hints. by putting up a family tree. If you have no English relatives, but you may have relatives from Canada or Australia or India or one of the other places, then this is the go-to place. And if you are completely out of all of those areas, then you might want to realize that they are also collecting a huge amount of US records that we don't have and that nobody has except Findmypast. And here's the key to Findmypast. Findmypast has negotiated an agreement with the Catholic diocese in the United States to digitize each and all of the Catholic diocese records, beginning in the large cities, Philadelphia, Boston, New York, down the coast of the larger cities with the diocese. And what that means is this, in short, for people who are primarily looking at records on FamilySearch. For many, many years, the Catholic Church and the diocese in the eastern part of the United States have absolutely refused to cooperate with FamilySearch in supplying digital copies of their records. There are virtually no Catholic records for the eastern part of the United States on FamilySearch. However, during the past few years, as Findmypast has made this agreement with the Catholic diocese, millions and millions of these records have been digitized and are now available on Findmypast. So if you have Catholic ancestors who lived in the eastern part of the United States, this is the place you should be going for your records. So there's lots of other these things, and I could go on about how each of these websites has benefited my particular research, and also could benefit others who may be surprised when they get into the program. Okay,